AI is not going to be a luxury for us. We're going to need AI to help us do the massive amount of things that need to be done to provide healthcare to people. An oil refinery and a hospital can have the same operating budget, but an oil refinery has 12 people working in it. A hospital has thousands of people.
Okay, so joining us now on Open Book is Dr. Ron Razmi. He's the co-founder and managing director of Zoe Capital. But the book is fascinating, and thank you for coming on, sir, because I want to talk to you a lot about what you're doing. The title of the book is AI Doctor, The Rise of Artificial Intelligence in Healthcare. And so I've read a lot about AI over the course of my life, the perils and pitfalls of AI, but this part of AI I find to be completely amazing, and this could be quite transformative for the next several generations of next several generations of citizens of the world, for that matter. But before we get there, Doc, tell us a little bit about your background before we frame out what you're working on.
Sure. And thank you for having me on. And I'm a big fan, and actually listened to the podcast and some great episodes and insightful discussions. Really, the long form where you can get into the story behind the story is great, especially if you're dealing with something like AI and healthcare, which are complicated and there are a lot of layers. I started out my career as a cardiologist. I was doing my training at the Mayo Clinic, and I got involved in technology development to improve delivery of healthcare. And that ignited my interest to be on the technology and entrepreneurial side of healthcare. So I went back to business school, and after business school, I joined McKinsey. So I worked in the healthcare group at McKinsey for a number of years before I saw the digital health revolution coming. And the digital health revolution was right after iPhone was released. You had smartphones, now you have health apps, you have smartwatches and so forth. So those of us with a background in healthcare and technology got excited that we can change how healthcare is delivered more efficiently, more effectively, using modern technologies like smartphones and digital wearables and all of that good stuff. It's been more challenging than we thought, to say the least. And we'll get into some of those reasons, but AI is now giving us a reason to be optimistic that we could improve quality, improve convenience, and lower cost at the same time, but not overnight.
I mean, one of the things you say, which I totally agree with, the machine has no emotion, so the machine is analyzing data. I think it's the quintessential objectivity. There's no, it's so powerful that it can think of thousands and thousands and thousands of different permutational outcomes of what something could be, which could help you from a diagnostic perspective, rule things out and rule things in. But my question to you, though, sir, is that given the overall space, what is the real impact? Is it cost savings? Is it drug discovery? Is it prescription, meaning going to give the precise prescription to the person pursuant to exactly what they have and what their blood type is and all that other stuff? Or is it all of it? Or where do you think what's the first mover for healthcare AI that's going to get everybody looking around saying, this is it, we got to use this all the time?
So I was on Power Lunch on CNBC a couple of weeks ago. The first question that Tyler asked was, Jamie Dimon said on this network an hour ago that AI is going to cure cancer. What say you? You have the book. What do you say? I said, well, yes, but not tomorrow. So it is really a foundational technology. AI is really a technology that goes through a lot of data and information and figures out what it means. That's what AI is. So when you're dealing with healthcare, you're dealing with a lot of information. A human body has billions of genes, trillions of microbiomes. we don't really know how all of this stuff works. We've made progress. Life expectancy has gone from around 35 to 80 in the last 150 years. However, all of that is in light of the fact that we really don't know how human body works. We almost know nothing about the brain. That's why we don't have anything for dementia and a lot of the brain diseases. So now we're coming into this fight with this powerful tool that helps us find relationships between our genes and our immune system and the foods that we eat and all of this stuff. So there are magnificent things ahead for us. But just like I told Tyler, it's not a year or two out. It might be a decade or two out for the really lofty, ambitious stuff like curing cancer and figuring out the secrets of the human body. However, there are immediate use cases around administration of healthcare, improving patient experience, home-based diagnostics that can make an impact in the next few years and provide a step forward. But the book is almost 370 pages long. There are 14 chapters in there, each that break down AI in diagnostics, AI in therapeutics, AI in drug discovery. So when you have a foundational technology, the use cases are many. It's just that some are going to be more doable in the short term. And those are also the investable use cases.
Okay, so Elon Musk and Google and these guys have been working for the last 10 years on self-driving cars. Mm-hmm. And, they've got some cool technology. The car comes out of the parking spot and comes to greet you in front of the store. That one seems to be working okay. But in general, driving, getting on and off the highway, they seem to be having a problem with. Should we be concerned about AI not having that human touch and potentially hurting us somehow? Making a mistake, crashing the car metaphorically.
In 2017, there were 5 FDA-approved AI products. Now there are almost 1,000. So there's been an explosion in AI for healthcare products. However, almost all of them are classified as human assistants. So a radiologist still needs to review an image that an AI solution reads. So humans are going to be included in this process for the foreseeable future. AI makes errors. AI doesn't have judgment. There are things that you can train an AI model to do a lot of things, and it does it consistently. It doesn't get tired. It probably does it much more precisely than humans. But there are things that evaluating the cost of making a mistake is not something that AI can do. So right. You and I can have all the data telling us to do something, but our instinct tells us there's a guy with a machete behind the door that we're about to open up. AI doesn't have that ability to calculate the cost of making an error. So it's right. going to need human supervision, but you can offload a tremendous amount of activities onto AI that are being done manually right now in healthcare. Healthcare, the number one problem in healthcare is the shortage of resources. We have a massive shortage of resources in the US. I was in the Middle East as part of my book tour. I went to Bahrain. I went to Saudi Arabia. I went to UAE. Everybody was complaining that they don't have enough doctors. They don't have enough nurses. They don't have enough hospitals. And we're suffering from exactly the same problem. So AI is not going to be a luxury for us. We're going to need AI to help us do the massive amount of things that need to be done to provide healthcare to people. If an oil refinery and a hospital can have the same operating budget, but an oil refinery has 12 people working in it, a hospital has thousands of people.
Okay, I want to get to. I mean, I think it's fascinating, but I want to get to the government. So I'm going to make you the czar. You're now the guy in charge of all healthcare related to AI, AI related to healthcare. So forget about Democrats or Republicans, and forget about left leaning strategies or right leaning strategies. What is the right policy? What would you be promulgating?
Yeah, I mean, government is critical in this. It's important to keep in mind. Working on a follow-on book that talks about supply side economics, and you ask what does supply side economics have to do in AI and healthcare? I've been writing about economics, macroeconomics for years, but one of the outputs of supply side economics that started in the early 80s was tax cuts, which supposedly would cause economic growth and there would be prosperity for everybody and so forth. And to say it hasn't worked out like that is really understating it. What's happened is when you do tax cuts, you have that budget deficits. We haven't seen the growth that these tax cuts. You see a short-term bump in growth, but you don't see a long-term increase in growth. And as a result of it, you start cutting government expenditures. And R&D expenditure is one of the first areas to go. It's important to realize almost all the technologies we're using today were developed using public sector funding, decades of research in universities, and then they end up becoming commercial ready. So AI has been developed through public sector funding over the last few decades till it reached the point where it was ready for Google and Amazon and everybody else to use the foundational technology and apply it for commercial use. So if I'm the health AI czar, first thing I do is make sure there's robust government funding to continue working on the very basic issues that need to be solved in order for everybody else to have the right tools to put their ideas on top of those tools and create commercial products that improve healthcare, transportation, manufacturing, and so forth. So government funding for basic R&D is one of my pet peeves. And that's why sort of writing about economic issues is critical, because they're so closely tied together. But also, a lot of the data, the way we collect data today in healthcare doesn't yield itself to easy AI analysis. So the data is written in narrative formats. There are no standards. It's hard to analyze that data. We need to come up with new standards on how we collect healthcare data in order to make it easy for AI to analyze. Since AI can take over a lot of the analysis and follow up with patients and create the opportunity for us to do proactive health rather than reactive health, going upstream and figuring out what are the infrastructure things we need to do in terms of aggregating everyone's data in one place. I mean, like, I had an accident by George Washington Bridge last year where they had to bring an ambulance and they took me to Harlem Hospital. I'm semi unconscious. They have none of my records. I get my primary care at Weill Cornell downtown in Tribeca, near where I live. When I went in a few months later for my annual physical, they did not have a record of my accident. This is not good. We're talking about one city, New York City, and my records reside in several different medical centers. You can't really use AI if one person's data is so fragmented. So we need national guidelines to consolidate the data. We need certification of the quality of these AI products by independent agencies. So when a hospital is considering buying something, they have assurances that it's high quality, that it's going to perform. You and I can walk into a CVS, we buy a bottle of Tylenol. We feel confident that Tylenol has been approved, the manufacturing process is being monitored by the government, and that makes that commercial transaction frictionless. It's good for CVS, it's good for you, it's good for government. They collect their tax dollars and so forth. We need something similar in AI where the buyers can be confident that they're buying quality products. And that's another area where government could step in and create the frameworks. So government does have a big role, and I hope they become very proactive with it.
Okay, give us some predictions. Wrote a great book. It's 5 or 10 years out from the date that the book was published. What's going on in the world? Am I going to a doctor still? Am I talking into a computer about my symptoms? Are they sending me a remote test kit at home to check my vital signs? Do I have a general practitioner?
A couple of things.
Do I need my psychologist? Can the AI be my shrink?
Great questions. First of all, I would say, given the strain that providing healthcare is putting on government budgets in all advanced economies, US, Europe, Japan, and so forth, being able to dial AI up as soon as possible to lower cost of care and improve quality and so forth. Talk about addressing budget deficits and improving government's ability to deal with an aging population. AI is really the answer. So if we have AI that can interact with someone who has chronic heart disease or diabetes and help manage them so they have better outcomes, then you're going to lower cost of care, because a lot of times the cost of care is tied to people going to the emergency room, hospitals, and so forth. So AI could actually be the answer to these massive budget deficits that are forecasted for us and other advanced economies. And a lot of it is due to Medicare, Medicaid, what government spends on healthcare. It's a big part of our federal budget. So with that in mind, we're, as an investment firm, we're right now investing in administrative and operational use cases. There's, for example, ambient documentation. It's a use case where you turn on the microphone when a doctor is visiting with the patient, listens to the conversation, and does the documentation for the doctor. The doctor doesn't need to take notes. When I was a practicing physician, it's one of the things I hated about my jobs was taking notes and doing the documentation. That's a prime use case that's here and now. Investors who were lucky to invest in companies like a Bridge and DeepScribe a couple of years ago when they were worth $20-30 million and they were just getting started. A Bridge just raised $150 million at $2.5 billion valuation. These are low-hanging fruits that are going to create 1,000x your money if you know which use case and which companies to invest in. We're looking at technologies for coding, where the doctor has to do coding in order to submit for reimbursement. It also used for public health and so forth. AI could read the doctor's note and do the coding for them. Another really pain in the ass, busy work. There is now AI on your smartphone that if you feel like you might have a urinary tract infection, something that's very common in females, you can pick up a kit from the drugstore and do a strip at home and hold your smartphone, and it tells you if you have a urinary tract infection. So you're going to have administrative and operational use cases. You're going to have use cases, for example, a chatbot that listens to you mention your complaints and connects you with the right level of care. It's not going to replace your doctor, but it's going to direct you more efficiently to the right level of care and help that doctor take care of you a lot more efficiently. Those are the immediate, the next 5-year type things.
Okay. All right. at this point in the podcast, I have 5 words that I read out to my authors.
Mm-hmm.
And then I ask them to respond to the 5 words sort of tied to their books. And so I'm going to say the word, whatever comes to your mind, you talk to me about it. Okay, you ready?
Sure.
So I say the word healthcare. You think what?
Responsible for 30% of all economic growth since the Industrial Revolution, according to McKinsey.
Yeah, and I agree. And that's the 35 to 85 move that you were discussing, right? You know,
Yeah,
that's led to the higher quality of life for this little animal on this planet called humans, right?
exactly. And,
Right.
you'll either improve productivity or more people
Right.
working to have GDP growth.
No question. I say the word patient. What do you think?
That's a tougher one because there are so many angles. I would say less than ideal experience with healthcare.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about hospitality, a lot of the other parts of the economy, since the digital revolution, our experience has improved so much. But healthcare is still very frustrating. People,
Okay.
people are they don't know where to get care. They get handed off. They have to navigate a very complicated sector. AI could help with that.
Okay. I'm going to say the word doctor.
Burned out.
Okay. All right. So the AI may help that, right? So let me say the word AI. What do you say when I say AI?
Promising with the right safeguards.
Okay. How about AI doctor?
Transforming healthcare from reactive to proactive.
But really, a game changer, though. I mean,
Absolutely. Absolutely a game changer. I try not to. I mean, I mentioned in the preface in the book, I make no prognostication or what's going to happen in 3 or 5 years because 5 years ago, a lot of the stuff that was forecasted for AI, none of it has happened.
mm-hmm.
There are business model misalignments. There are data issues. As I mentioned, there are workflows that are hard to change. There are real barriers to bringing this technology into mainstream. So the world is going to belong to people who are good at doing upfront analysis, figuring out the right use cases, figuring out how to design a product that dances around these barriers. And that was my motivation to write the book because I've been on the clinical, technical, business side of healthcare. I've had a 360 view of these issues. I've built a company and seen how difficult it is to bring a digital product into the healthcare environment. I've learned that this is more difficult than people think. However, I also appreciate the immense potential if we solve for these barriers, if we make the data more consolidated, if the healthcare infrastructure is upgraded and the way we collect the data makes it easier to analyze, then we're going to start seeing all kinds of benefits because it's going to make medical research much faster. We're going to find new treatments on an accelerated timeline. It's going to allow us right now. The reason wearables and apps haven't really changed the paradigm is because the data they generate, you don't have anybody that can analyze that data on an ongoing basis and combine it with all your other data that sits in probably several different electronic health records and figure out what needs to be done. AI can start doing that heavy lifting for us. And if we start managing patients with chronic diseases in their home environment rather than the emergency room and hospitals, we're going to lower the cost of care dramatically. That's what I was talking about in terms of the impact on federal budget deficits and so forth. But you can see there are issues that need to be solved before that's possible. So in the book, I go into these issues in great depth and try to paint a realistic picture for the entrepreneurs, for people developing these products, for people who are considering buying those for their medical centers or for their research companies, and for investors on how do you evaluate the opportunity. This is one where you need to have a cross-functional view of things to make the right decisions.
I mean, it's incredible, what's happening, and I'm very, very grateful to you, Doctor, for coming on, because so many people are behind the curve in terms of understanding the quantum leap that healthcare, many other sectors of the economy, but healthcare, and as you said, if we can get the healthcare right, it leads to unbelievable positive externalities for the quality of our lives and their economy, the economic growth, et cetera. So I really appreciate you joining us today on Open Book. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Before I let you go, sir, I just want to repeat the title again. The title of the book is AI Doctor, The Rise of Artificial Intelligence in Healthcare. Dr. Ron Razmi, thank you very much for coming on Open Book with us.
I think the greatest threat facing our country today, surprise, is not China. It's actually the extreme political partisanship from both sides of the political aisle. And it's marked by this incivility. It's marked by name calling. It's marked by getting down to the mud with folks who want to go there. And I've just never wanted to go there. So I'm not going to get in that type of contest with Donald Trump. He enjoys being in that milieu. And I don't think it's good for the country.
And so joining us now on Open Book is Mark T. Esper. He's the 27th Secretary of Defense. He wrote a phenomenal book. Mark, it truly enjoyed the book, A Sacred Oath, Memories of a Secretary of Defense During Extraordinary Times. There's also a great background in this book about your life and what you've done. And first of all, thank you for your service.
Well, thanks, Anthony.
I've known of you, but I got to tell my viewers and listeners, when I first really met Mark for the first time, I opened the door to the suite at the Army-Navy game, and Mark said to me, "Oh, are you here for the Trump Fire Support Network?" And I said, "Yes." Well, of course I am. Okay, although I was probably the most short-lived of all the people, but it was certainly a very impactful time in my life. I got fired before it was fashionable to get fired, by the way. I was like the first of the 80 people that got fired. But you are a man that loves the country. You wrote something. I'm going to read this to my viewers because I really want them to go out and buy your book because they'll learn so much about what makes this country great. Mark Meadows called you and said, the president isn't happy with you. You're not sufficiently loyal. And you said, and I quote, "My oath is to the Constitution, not to him." What do you think, Mark, about all of this? Like, when you read the Constitution, you served the country, you went to West Point, you understand this decentralized nature of the government, the checks and balances in the system. What do you think is going on right now? Like, what do we need to do? You and me are contemporaries. What do we need to do to teach younger people about the sacredness of what you said to Mark Meadows?
Yeah. Well, first of all, you're very kind and generous in your comments, and I appreciate you giving me the chance today to talk about my memoir and whatever else, topical events you want to discuss. So thank you. I appreciate that. Look, I was very fortunate to have been accepted to go to West Point at the young age of 18 in what were still the formative years of my life. And so at the academy, they taught us the importance of duty and honor and country that was drilled into you and explained to you and emphasized. And of course, the criticality of putting your country above all things. And as I write in the memoir, I swore my first oath to the Constitution at the age of 18, not at the age of 55 or so when I became Secretary of Defense. So it was something I lived with from a very young age and continued throughout a career in the Army and eventually as a civilian. So, look, I think the important thing to answer your specific question is people coming into service for the country, either through the military, of course, but as civilians, whether you're a political appointee or a career civilian, you've got to understand that oath comes number one. It's to the Constitution. It's not to a president. It's not to a party. It's not to a political philosophy. Frankly, it's not to your own policy preferences. And oftentimes we have that happen in our government as well. but it's what is the oath to the country, what's best, and then from there, you are responsible for carrying out your tasks.
I mean, so well said. And we've had probably so many war stories that we could share, we would laugh about together, because I worked with Trump during the campaign more than in the White House. Mm-hmm. And I guess I didn't see the kaleidoscope going on in his brain that I should have. That's my fault. I have to own that. But I want to go over a couple of things, and I'm just going to call it crazy shit. Is that okay? Because people know I'm a profane person.
That's an acceptable contemporary.
Yes, you accept this. Okay, so this is some crazy shit in a sacred oath. Your fantastic book. Okay, number one, he proposed going after the cartels and said no one would know it was us. He suggested bringing the military to shoot protesters. You can't get more authoritarian than that. That would have been like Tiananmen Square. He proposed military action in Venezuela. He proposed a blockade of Cuba. I know from other sources inside the White House, he asked people, well, what if we nuked Tehran? I mean, the guy was like, now, Trump would always say that he was just kidding or all this other stuff, but he's the American president saying and spewing this sorts of nonsense. So now, you're a rational guy. You have a phenomenal reputation and you're very well read. How do you respond to this? And I'll again call it crazy shit. So how do you respond to crazy shit like this, Mark?
Well, part of the challenge too, I might add though, is you had many folks around him enabling or amplifying.
Yes, no question. Yeah, they were his sycophants.
Exaggerating those ideas. So that was also presented another complication for a number of folks in the administration who were trying to kind of manage this, if you will. So look, I think you have to go back in all things, whether it's the military, government, corporate life, and I've served in all three. What are your core principles and what's the mission of your institution? And stay true to those things. And I always felt that I owed the president my honest advice. I owed him options more than just one that he might choose or propose, and try and figure out how do I help him advance the policies that he was elected for, but do so within certain guardrails, if you may, that have been long established with regard to our Constitution, of course, the law, and the norms of accepted behavior, if you will. So that I kind of viewed that as my job, because I had not just a responsibility to the country, but also to my institution, to the people who work for me, both civilian and military. All these different factors play in when you're in these jobs. And you experienced it as well during your tenure at the White House. There are a lot of stakeholders, a lot of people with different opinions and different agendas, oftentimes not, a lot of times they're personal agendas, unfortunately. And those are other things that you have to work around.
I mean, you see, this is why you lasted longer than me, because you're like such a diplomat. I used to like fight with him and say, are you effing crazy? And he would look at me and then he would say, oh, well, I'm just kidding. I'm like, well, you don't sound like you're the American president. I mean, he had me in Air Force One in the office, and he's like, I'm going to veto the Russian sanctions bill. I don't know if you remember this. It was like July of 2017. Paul Ryan and McConnell passed the sanctions bill because of what the tampering in the election. I'm going to veto it and show these guys Russia had nothing to do with my election. I'm like, they're going to call Chuck Schumer and override the veto. And then he looks at me. He's like, they can do that? I'm like, yeah, they can do that. Then he calls McCann, the White House. He's calling him from the Air Force One, and he's asking him if they could do that. Yeah. And of course, McCann says that they can do that, and then he looks at me and goes, "Oh, you're a smart cookie." Next day, he signs the bill. Kushner asked me, well, how the hell did you get him to sign it? I said, I told them they were going to get an override. These are his teammates.
But you were doing exactly what you should do. Just what I said. You were being honest with him, your best advice, and you were giving him information that he didn't have, that somebody else might not have told him.
But Jared said something very telling, Mark. He said, you can't talk to him like that, because now he knows that you know something that he didn't know. And he's so insecure that he's going to say, oh, Anthony's out there telling people that I'm an idiot, that I don't know. You don't talk to him like that. I said, he goes, I couldn't get him to sign it for 6 weeks. I said, well, why didn't you just tell him they were going to override? He goes, you can't talk to him like that. And you know exactly what I'm talking about, because McMaster and I McMaster was trying to explain a Shia and a Sunni, the difference between the two Muslim faiths, the sects, and he got pissed off because he felt like he was being lectured to. You follow what I'm saying?
Look, there is a way to do it, and I said this a couple times. You have to learn how to manage your boss, right? Or how you manage yourself with the boss to kind of make sure that you can help him get to the right place, and that's part of the art. Some of that drama is too much for me to figure out, and again, my view is to always, present it faithfully, give him my honest opinions, and if he didn't like it, which he often didn't, that's fine. But I felt I was doing my job, and you obviously had a different relationship because yours was more personal, arguably, than mine. But look, that's what we do. That's what you owe, not just him, but you owe the country in the role you're playing.
I guess I have to ask you this. I hope you don't mind me asking you this because I have to ask this of myself, and so I've got to, and if it's a little bit of our support group thing. So what were you thinking? Okay, because my friend Vinny Viola, he looked at the situation. He was offered the Secretary of the Army. He said, not for me. I made the mistake of ego. I think you were thinking about service, right? You were like, okay, how can I better the country, right?
Right. And Vinny approached it the same way. Right. Vinny entered West Point at age 18 or so. He's another great American hero, and he would have done a great job as Secretary of the Army, but he had obviously a much more far more complicated financial situation than I had. But look, he and I and others are, gluttons for service, if you will. And that public service calling has always been there and probably always will. And look, that's what you go in to serve. You go to serve your country. Again, not necessarily a president or a party or a philosophy, but your country. And that's why it was, it's been so unfair. And this happens every cycle, both sides of the party. Is people start casting blame and name calling about people who choose to serve, and I think that's wrong. It's unfair. There are some who deserve it, but it's a minority. Well, most people go to serve their country.
I'll tell you that you and I obviously have a mutual friend. We didn't start out so friendly because he fired my ass. Okay, that was General Kelly, but we've become very close friends, and he is incredibly fond of you. I was in Iowa at a public speaking event with him, and he said, you and Mark Esper would get on. You got to get together with Mark. So it was fortunate that we were able to connect with each other.
Well, he's a great man. He's given his entire life to the country. His son served. He lost his son in combat for the country.
Yes, he's a Gold Star. He's a 4-star general, Gold Star family member. You and Kelly have something in common, though, which is remarkable restraint. Okay, so I want you to react to this. Okay, in the book. It's sort of after the book, Trump tweets out about your book, okay, that you were a rhino, which is a Republican in name only. You were incapable of leading. And I had to run the military myself, which is typical Trump nonsense, okay. When he started firing at me, okay, I have no restraint. I think I called him the fattest president since William Howard Taft because I know he hates being so fat. But you guys... give me the restraint lesson. Is that coming from the military? Is that coming from, all right, I'm just going to ignore this? Go ahead. Give me the restraint lesson.
Look, I think part of it is how I was raised, number one. Number two is...
Right. I was raised like a wild animal swinging from the trees.
No.
You were raised in this really morally rectitude field.
Parents.
What's that?
But look, I think the second thing, I think the greatest threat facing our country today, surprise, is not China. It's actually the extreme political partisanship from both sides of the political aisle. And it's marked by this incivility. It's marked by name calling. It's marked by getting down to the mud with folks who want to go there. And I've just never wanted to go there. So I'm not going to get in that type of contest with Donald Trump. He enjoys being in that milieu. And I don't. And I don't think it's good for the country. So look, he called, like you said, he name calls everybody. He calls me a rhino. I worked in Reagan's think tank, if you will, the Heritage Foundation, a conservative organization. I worked for Republican conservative leaders on the Hill, ranging from Jesse Helms to Fred Thompson to Bill Frist. So I'm comfortable that my record speaks to the fact that I'm a Republican, but I'm a Reagan Republican.
Right.
And I believe in common sense, core American values. And
I appreciate that. I got the chance to sit next to Ed Meese in 2012.
Good man.
One of the Republican events in D.C. We did a debate in D.C. as Governor Romney was rising to the nomination. I got, just by luck, I happened to be sitting next to him, and that was a thrill for me because obviously I admired him as a student when I was a kid.
Right.
I want to set the scene about the American military and the Pentagon, and I want you to tell us some things, from your life experience in your book, which you write about this amazing organization known as the Defense Department and your time there. And what would you say to young people about their Defense Department and the Pentagon, the culture there, and the responsibility that it has not only here, but around the world?
I'm going to differentiate the question a little bit too, because there's the Pentagon, and I served 5 tours in that building as both an Army officer and a civilian. So I know the Pentagon, but I think more importantly, I want to talk about the armed forces, the fielded forces, whether it's a ship at sea, a Marine training, a forward deployed soldier, whatever the case may be. That is the heart and soul of America's military. That's where you have young men and women from all walks of life, from all quarters of the country, from all faiths and ethnicities coming together, wearing a common uniform with a standard mission to defend our nation. And they work together to do it, and often under very trying circumstances. And they bring their families along to do it as well. And that's probably the toughest job in the military. So to me, there's a big difference. And I tell young people, look, you don't have to serve a career. Come serve 2, 3, 4 years. You'll never regret it. You'll meet some of the best people you'll ever will. You'll stay friends forever. The experiences will carry you a lifetime, and you'll learn some tremendous skills that any employer would love to have in his or her workplace. And that's kind of my pitch to young people today.
And it is very well said. I guess, and I want to hear all that. I think it's very important for young people to hear it. Let me take a different approach to the question. Because I don't think people understand the magnitude, Mark. Is it an $800 billion military? How big is the footprint around the world? How many bases? What is the design plan? Why is our Navy so large? What are we thinking about with our Navy?
Look, it's the one of the top 2 or 3 largest organizations in the world, certainly the largest in the United States government. 2.8 million people, civilian and military, a $840 billion budget. We have, I think, 1,700 installations around the world in almost 100 plus countries. And it's a vast organization focused on one thing: defending the American people, defending the country, and advancing our interests abroad. And that's why we have a global military force with an international footprint. And every day, again, young Americans, most of them are between 17 and 24, are out there on the front lines doing it. And the job I held, people think about, like you said, the Navy, the Air Force. But look, you're also responsible for hospitals and daycare centers and schools and electric facilities and you name it, all kinds of things. It's like running a small city that's deployed around the world in all these locations.
It's a truly extraordinary thing. The more and more I learn about it, the more impressed I am. But yet we both know that even though we have this amazing military, all this great technology, it still can't solve every problem around the world. And so we've got this big problem going on in the Ukraine right now. I've listened to some of your interviews. You were a little critical of what was going on in Ukraine with the Biden administration. What are your thoughts now? Tell us what you think is going on in the Ukraine, and what do you think the potential outcomes could be?
Well, look, I think Ukraine marks the first battle of this long struggle in the 21st century between autocracies and democracies. And it's proven a strategic failure on multiple levels for Vladimir Putin. And Ukraine has showed us the virtue of strength and tenacity and skill and courage by pushing back a much, much bigger neighbor who's a bully. And they've taught us some lessons about tenacity and grit, right? And so I think it's important for America to live up to our values and, frankly, to defend forward that we support the Ukrainians. They're not asking us for men and material, American soldiers, Marines or whatnot, to come defend them. All they're asking for is arms and ammunition. And I think the quicker and sooner we can provide that, which is where I've been critical of the Biden administration, that the shorter this war will be and the less deadly, if you will. But look, we think about it in Europe, but Xi Jinping in Beijing is watching very closely what's happening, and he's sizing us up. He's sizing up our NATO allies. He's sizing up the Western democracies. And I'm sure it's all figuring into his calculations about whether he attacks or tries to seize Taiwan or some other neighbor in the Indo-Pacific.
Right. So it's interesting. We're there providing the support. It's the right cause, but we also have to send messages to other people that we're going to protect freedom and democracy around the world, which is super important to us. Right. So let me frame it differently, because I think it's important for Americans to understand this. Why though? Because remember, we've had a history of isolationism, and we have a history of people saying, hey, that's not our problem. Franklin Roosevelt had some great speeches in the late 30s explaining, well, actually, it is our problem because it's going to end up on our shores.
That's right.
So
That's right.
So explain it to us, Mark.
Look, the best way to explain it is something nearly everybody understands. It's the schoolyard bully, right? If you don't stand up to the schoolyard bully, all the bully does is pick on more kids, other kids, and eventually it comes around to you, right? And so if you can stand up, face that bully down, it puts him in his place, and you can rid yourself of the problem, if you will. Look, if Russia captures Ukraine, who's going to be next? Georgia, Moldova? Would he then try and make a move on the Baltics? And at the same time, while Putin is acting very aggressively in Europe, does that give Xi Jinping the motivation to make a move as well? If we're tied down there and we're not responding, does Xi Jinping look and say, look, the Americans really are weak. They're focused inward. They really don't care about international affairs. They're not going to support others. So I'll make my move now. And at the end of the day, look, the vision that Xi Jinping in Beijing wants to achieve is a world by the year 2049 where China dominates, where we're living by their rules and norms. And I would say to you and your listeners, if you love living in a surveillance state with concentration camps, if you love having no personal freedoms, no liberty, if you love having no rule of law, then move to China, move to Russia. But that's not the world I want to live in. I want my kids to live in. And that's what we're fighting for. And we don't want to go back to the Cold War, but unfortunately, it looks like we're heading that way.
You brought up 2049, and the reason I believe that you did that is that they have these 10, 15, 20, 100-year plans. 2049 would be the 100th anniversary of the communist takeover of
Chinese Communist Party, right?
Mainland China. Right. And so I guess my question to you is, where is our long-term planning? We had a policy of containment. George Kennan helped to develop it. It became the Truman Doctrine, 40-year plan, contain communism, defeat communism. The plan begins in 1946. It ends in 1989 or something like that. You get my point. Where is our long-term planning now?
Wow. Well, first of all, I commend you for that quick recitation of American foreign policy's history and strategic doctrine. So that's great. Look, we've struggled for finding out what that doctrinal name is since the end of the Cold War in 1991. And I think we're going back to containment, if you will, containment of the Chinese. And I'm fine with that because they are the ones misbehaving. They're the ones trying to change the international order. But we haven't come to that yet. Now, this is where I give credit to the Trump administration. I think an achievement of that era was the fact that we consolidated a view within the United States government that China is a long-term strategic threat, and that we need to get all organs of government focused on that. And I think we made a lot of accomplishments. And my role was to really implement a national defense strategy that said just that. And we made a lot of progress with regard to doing that, standing up a China office, reorienting our doctrine, making sure that we were teaching Chinese tactics in our schools, all those types of things. But we're still not there yet as a country. We need a countrywide approach. And then we need our allies and partners to come along. Some are already there, particularly if you look to into the Asia Pacific. But in Europe, they're not all there yet. And we'll need to stand together if we're going to deal with that. But I think we're coming full circle back to the strategy of containment. So
let me ask the obvious question. Chinese have a different economy than the former Soviet Union.
They have one.
Yeah, exactly, and they've got a lot going on there that is in some ways very powerful. They've got AI going on, chip development and manufacturing. They've deployed a lot of resources into this market-based, communist, centralized, hybrid economy where the government is helping the private sector and vice versa. There's a positive loop there. There's negative loops in some ways, but there's a positive loop there which is different from the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was weakened by its ideology. The Chinese Communist Party has a different sort of ideology, harder to combat. Mark, what's your reaction to that? And then how would we have to gauge ourselves to win that, if you will, that competition?
But great point. You've summed it up well. A very great insights. And you're right. I mean, the Soviet Union was, I like to say, a unidimensional threat, right? We were really concerned about their military capability. China is a full spectrum threat. They have a very large, capable military. They have a very large economy, the second largest in the world. It's very diverse. It's number 3. They have a lot of tech prowess. And number 4, they have a lot of diplomatic reach as well. So they are a full spectrum threat. And that'll be the challenge, particularly on the economic side. We see some of our partners in Europe, especially Germany and France. And for example, President Macron and the head of the EU Commission are there right now, or just left China on a trade deals. That's the area that is the most complex, because we are so integrated, our economies, United States, European, so forth and so on. We're not going to completely break from China, nor should we, but I do think we need to have what we call the strategic decoupling. That means key areas such as rare earth elements and certain materials. That means semiconductors. That means some other high-end technologies that are really crucial to the Chinese military and intelligence apparatus. I think we need to start denying them. The administration has done a good job on this, begun in the Trump era, and I think it needs to continue. But we're going to see a strategic decoupling, but not a complete decoupling, because we can't afford to do so, frankly.
Yeah, well, we can't afford to do so, but also I think we both know that a little bit of economic interdependence and a little bit of commercial activity between us may reduce some of the tension.
Yeah, you hope. That was the theory when we let them into the WTO in 2000, 2001. And as you know, I write about this in my memoir. I was there in Congress at the Senate at the time. And the theory was, if we let them into the WTO, if we brought them into all these international organizations, that they would continue to moderate over time and change and become accepting of the international order. And it just hasn't proven itself true. And as you know, I mean, again, I part of me wants to believe that economic integration argument, but we've seen Xi Jinping crack down really hard in the economic sector in China, particularly the tech sector, and it's hurt him economically. Now, it looks like he's trying to claw his way back a little bit and find some type of middle ground. Right. But this is going to be a fundamental question going forward: is where will Xi Jinping take his economy?
You're bringing up a fascinating point, because that's how we all got trained, right? That's the whole Kissinger, Nixon, even Reagan. Deng Xiaoping. He's reforming. Let's help them rise, increase their living standards. I mean, this goes back to George Marshall, rising living standards around the world.
Yeah, we brought almost 700 million Chinese out of poverty just by letting them in and helping them come forward.
Right. No, it's fascinating. President Xi visited President Trump in April of 2017. He was carrying a book with him by Graham Allison, the dean of the Kennedy School. And I think the title of the book was Destined for War. And the thesis in the book was that a rising superpower often threatens the existing power structure. I mean, he took it all the way back to the Peloponnesian War between Athens.
Yeah, it's the so-called Thucydides trap.
Right, exactly. He took it right back to the Peloponnesian War. And so he put you through 16 episodic events, 12 of which we went to war, 4 of which we didn't. The most dramatic one was when the UK was in decline and its kissing cousin, the United States, was in rise. And so they were okay. Same Christianity, same set of rules, and, white English speaking people, let's just be frank about it. So they didn't go after each other. But now you have 2 different tribes. One is rising, and we can debate whether or not one is declining. I'd like to think America's best days are ahead of it if we can get our act together.
I agree.
But here we are. So what do you say to that as a foreign policy theorist, a defense theorist? How do we prevent the tension that the Thucydides trap, if I'm even pronouncing it right, is upon us right now, between us and the Chinese?
Well, it's an interesting theory, a lot of historical example, and it's important that we learn from it, from those examples. I don't think that war with China is inevitable, and certainly not imminent. I think it's something that we need to continue to manage. I think you have to work it in multiple ways, and in some of those ways may seem like they conflict with each other, but they don't. So, for example, going back to our previous discussion, I think we need to continue to pursue some degree of economic integration in as many non-strategic areas as possible. That gives everybody on both sides incentive not to go to war, not to have tension. On the other hand, at the same time, we need to build the most capable military we can. It goes back to Ronald Reagan's peace through strength doctrine. And we need to bring our allies and partners along with us, because what we want is Xi Jinping to wake up every morning, to look outside his window. We want him to look at the Taiwan Strait and look at Taipei and say, not today. It's not worth it. It's not worth losing my economy, and it's not worth having my military destroyed by the United States and its allies. And that's what we have to manage until we get a new set of leaders in Beijing.
Mm-hmm. I think it's well said, and I think that's been the policy, and I think it's also reflected there in the Ukraine. The late and very terrific and the late great Ash Carter had the opportunity to interview him a few months prior to his untimely death. He said something to me. He said something to me that I want you to react to. He said, "Anthony, the Russian military has been decimated, incredibly weakened, more so than even the press is indicating." And obviously, there's propagandists on both sides. The Russians are telling us they're winning the war. The Ukrainians, we believe, are winning the war. What is really happening there? And is Ash Carter correct that their military has been decimated?
Yeah. So first of all, we miss Ash. He was a good man, and his death was so tragic and too soon, right, for all of us. But
absolutely,
he was a very smart man too, and I was privileged to get to know him. He was helpful to me when I was Secretary of Defense. But look, I think he's right. We know at this point more than 90% of the Russian ground forces have been committed to Ukraine, and they've been torn up, decimated. And I think in a way that, they've proved themselves not to be very capable going into the fight, whether from the general officer level to the NCOs to the privates. Their equipment has been found to have many flaws and weaknesses. Their tactics are unsound. So when you take all that and you decimate it, not only do they have a very incapable, incompetent ground force now, it will take them years and years and years to rebuild it, because their industrial base has been wiped out as well. That is due largely to the economic and financial and other sanctions, tech sanctions we placed on them. And we need to continue to do that. Now, that said, that's the good news. The bad news is their Air Force is largely intact. Their Navy is largely intact, and it's a very good Navy, and they still have nuclear weapons. And so we need to be very cognizant that they still remain, while their army's been decimated, they still remain quite capable. Whether they are as competent in those other areas as we thought their army was, who knows? But I think we need to be we need to keep those things into consideration.
When you and I were young, although I'm in denial and I like to think of myself as still young, we
both are.
Yeah, exactly. Let's continue the denialism, Marcus. Okay, but
yes.
in the 1989 period, I was coming out of law school, and I was told Japan Inc. and that the Japanese were going to take over the world. They had the best economic footprint, and their stock market was soaring, and they were going to eat everybody's lunch. That did not happen. We were told that the Soviet Union prior to that could eventually envelop the world. That did not happen. I'm wondering if sometimes we think linearly, but the world's happening around us exponentially. Is there a scenario where Putin loses control, and even possibly the Chinese Communist Party? Because you and I both know, we're students of history. These one-party systems have a tendency to last about 70 years, and then they break down and they sort of dissolve. And both of these things are in overtime. So what say you to that sort of radical contrarian thought?
Well, first of all, I agree with you about what was talked about in the early 90s. I was going to grad school then as well. And everybody wants to predict America's decline and demise and downfall. And we're just such a vibrant nation with this, the spirit of immigrants coming in and a very innovative culture. You can never count us out. So I'm very hopeful.
We like failure in this culture. I mean, I've been failing upwards for 30 years, Esper.
There you go.
Failing upwards.
There you go. Well, look, we got fired in our last job, so there you go.
Yeah, well, it won't be the last time I've been fired, though. I can assure you of that. Okay, I'm looking forward to more firings in my future.
But these authoritarian states are quite brittle, and they get more brittle over time. And I think it's questionable as to what happens to Putin. He's now fighting a three-front war, right? He's fighting a military battle in Ukraine. He's fighting, if you will, the West, led by NATO, and he's fighting on the home front. There's a lot of tension inside Russia, and the question is, can he survive that? I don't know Russian politics all that well, but we also know that he's a former KGB agent. I'm sure he knows what's happening all around him, but he could fall. He could be pushed out. Now, whoever comes behind him may not necessarily be better. It could be a real, hardcore right winger. We just don't know, and this is why it's so important. We need to get beyond Putin and try and restore some sense of democracy in that country, so that we have, there's more checks and balances in what happens there. And look, Xi Jinping in the other part of the world just secured himself a third unprecedented term for 5 years. If he remains healthy, he'll probably take another 5 years. He's going to be around for a while, I suspect. So these guys aren't going away. Certainly not the Chinese leadership anytime soon.
Well said. I guess my last question on this, and I'm going to switch to my lightning round, and we'll conclude this fascinating interview. But is democracy? I think we're trying to export it into Iraq. Iraq is probably a better place today than it was when Saddam Hussein had it, but obviously it's a difficult place. But is it exportable? Number one, is democracy exportable? Number two, are nations like Russia and China, tell me, they've had histories of kingdoms, monarchies, czars, autocracy. So is it possible to even break that cycle and create democracy in countries like those?
Well, there's far more better qualified people than me to answer this, but I'll take a stab at it. Look, I think it's exportable if the people want it, if they're willing to fight for it, if they're willing to defend it. And we didn't see that in Afghanistan, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was questionable for a period of time there in Iraq. And like you said, now at least Iraq has some type of functioning democracy. There's a lot going on internal with regard to partisanship and Sunni versus Shia, as you mentioned earlier. But it's something. But look, I think at the end of the day, we can't impose our values on people. We can't impose our form of government. If they want it, if they're willing to fight for it and defend it, then I think we should help them. But I think we need to get better at figuring those things out earlier than what we did in Afghanistan, for example. We spent a lot of time there trying to work within a culture that never had, that I can recall, a true democratic experience. And because of the nature of the fight, the Civil War, they weren't willing in the end to fight for it. At least they didn't have the political leadership. Probably, to be more fair, didn't have the political leadership that was willing to stay and fight and defend it, like President Zelensky in Ukraine was willing to defend his democracy.
Well said. Okay, I've got 5 words, statements. It's actually people in your case. I need you to give me a lightning fire response to these, if you don't mind. Okay, ready? Okay. Let's start with Chris Miller.
I don't know him. I think I met him once. I don't know him.
All right, let's move on. Kash Patel.
I think I maybe met Kash once as well. His reputation is being a bad actor, but that's based on what other people said, what I've read, so forth and so on. But
okay, so these are players coming in after the facts. You don't really know them. How about General Nakasone?
Paul Nakasone is an American treasure in many ways. He's a very capable officer who's led both the NSA and Cyber Command. I got a lot of respect for him, and we work together very well.
Vice President Pence.
I like Vice President Pence. I think he's a good man, an honest man, who did an extraordinary job. And got a lot of respect for him. He certainly showed who he really was on January 6th.
Well, I'm in your camp with the vice president. I have an enormous amount of respect for him, and I think that, like yourself, he exercised restraint when necessary. And Mark, you're never going to say this, so I'm going to say it. Okay, I guarantee that there were things that you've done silently and anonymously that served and protected the country during your term in the Trump administration. And I know I can say that about General Kelly and, for that matter, Vice President Pence, and the most dramatic thing for Vice President Pence was the 6th of January,
Right.
in
Absolutely.
terms of keeping our constitutional dignity. What about President Zelensky?
I think he's a man who rose to the occasion and stood tall during some tough times. I think if he would have left Kyiv in those early days of the conflict, when I guess we called over and offered him a way out, there would be a very different situation in that country now. I suspect the government would have collapsed. The military might not have fought as hard, and Russia would have occupied far more of Ukraine these days. So he's his actions are very Churchillian, if you will.
He can win this.
Absolutely, he can win this. He just needs to have the arms and ammunition and assistance that he keeps asking for, and we keep slow rolling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. We like to do that, right? What did Churchill say about us, right? We do the right thing, but we have to exhaust every other possibility, right?
That's
what about our old boss? Let's end it with Donald Trump.
Look, he's obviously a complicated figure. I've said my issue with him on many occasions is he doesn't put the country first. He puts himself first. And in leaders, you need people of character and integrity who are willing to sacrifice themselves, if you will, and certainly put country first. And he doesn't check any of those boxes for me. And so that's why I don't think he's fit to be president. I'm hoping that we see a next generation of leaders within the GOP, and frankly, on the Democrat side as well, rise up and move beyond the leaders we have today. And that's my hope. And I hope we'll see another Ronald Reagan at some point too.
Couldn't agree with you more. And I think we have to get there, and we have to help these people get there.
Right.
What's next for you before I let you go, sir?
Oh, I'm busy these days working in venture capital and private equity and boards and public speaking and stuff like that. So I have a busy agenda with lots of things, and we'll see what the future holds. I never rule anything in or out.
All right. Well, I think your future is incredibly bright, and I hope it's back in the service of our country, this fragile democracy that we both love. I appreciate you joining me today on Open Book, and the title of your book is A Sacred Oath, Memories of a Secretary of Defense During Extraordinary Times. Thanks for joining us, Mark.
Thank you. You take care and have a great week.